Will EQ boldenone actually turn your blood to cement? Stay tuned. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show, your weekly question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Whatever is on your mind, be it bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, it is all on the table. We are in March, so we are now 8.5 weeks from the Pittsburgh Pro and the New York Pro and the thick of the contest season. We have the Detroit Pro big show coming up in 2.5 weeks. We're going to go right into the questions. The first two questions on the show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question: I've been experimenting with higher volume and felt exhausted, feeling like I need to take a nap in the middle of the day, also mentally drained during the day. Is this a sign of overtraining? But I go back to the naps because, Dave, you've always been a big advocate, especially during your bodybuilding career, of taking midday naps.
Yeah, I mean, a nap is not, and being tired during the middle of the day is not necessarily a sign that you're overtraining. My body always seems to want to get a nap after a tough workout, like for recovery purposes. But three definite signs that you're overtraining are: number one, exhaustion all the time. If you're always exhausted, you're definitely overtraining, okay? If you're walking around and you say to yourself, you know what, I wish I didn't have to go to the gym today, but I'm going to go anyway because I know I have to go, that's not a good sign. So you should want to go to the gym. You should have this like, I can't wait to get to the gym type of attitude. And if you're getting weaker at the gym, in other words, you feel like, your strength is going down, that's another sign of it. So if you have those three signs, more than likely you're overtraining. Now, there's other, symptoms. They say if your resting pulses in the morning are high, whereas you should be lower in the morning. If they're going high, that's a symptom. Because what happens is when you overtrain, and this happens a lot when people do high volume, you're exhausting the neurotransmitters. And I've discussed this before, but I think it's warrants repeating again because we always have a new audience coming in. The muscles and the nerves don't touch each other, okay? So for the nerve to tell the muscle to contract, it has to release a chemical into this space between the nerve and the nerve ending and the muscle, which is called the neuromuscular space, or the synapse. It releases a neurotransmitter. Now, there's different neurotransmitters. In the brain, we use serotonin, dopamine, GABA. In the muscles, usually it's acetylcholine or epinephrine. And you get, these chemicals that get released get used up. So if you're constantly exercising, at an extreme level and exhausting the use of these neurotransmitters, eventually you can run out of them. And when you run out of them, what happens now is the nerve can't communicate well with the muscles. So you get weaker. You don't get in your brain, you get like fog, right? You don't think as clearly. You're tired more because your body is saying, please rest, sleep, because sleep is what helps recover the neurotransmitters, and rest helps recover the neurotransmitters. Your body is giving you these signals and it's saying, stop doing what you're doing. You're doing too much. We can't keep up with what you're doing. And so that's why I always found the best way not to overtrain is to do lower volume. And I found that by doing lower volume and heavier weights, I actually grew way, way better. Now, different people can overtrain at different rates. I think Ronnie Coleman, I've seen some of the volume he does with the heavy weights, and he was training each body part twice a week. How he recovered from that is a testament to how great his genetics are. I knew what my limitations were, so I had to do less, and I took more of the Dorian Yates approach, and it worked for me very well. When I was doing more volume, I was feeling that feeling of overtraining, and I was getting smaller and actually weaker. So, I think that if you want to be a bodybuilder and you want to build a lot of muscle, brief, under an hour, workouts, high intensity, good form, full range of motion, heavy weights is the best way to build muscle and recover adequately. Don't look at what the genetic freaks do out there, because they can do anything and recover and respond and grow. It sounds like you're definitely going through some overtraining symptoms.
Second question, again, these first two questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. What would be a good cutting/summer cycle for a non-competitor? Would I do a modified pre-contest cycle or something close to it? It is March. We're a few months away, but you're going to start to get those kind of questions.
Yeah. I love the cutting cycle. Remember, steroids don't burn fat. They build muscle and help repair. So anything you take is going to help you in that regard. There's no specific drugs that do one thing better than another. By convention, a lot of people take the drugs that don't make you hold as much water when they're dieting, because you want to see the results a little nicer. Now, if you're not a competitor, there's no reason to do 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a week unless you want to actually build a lot of muscle. If you just want to look good, you can do some EQ, you can do some Masteron. If your attitude or your personality is such, you can do a little trenbolone. I would always put a base of testosterone in there, but you could probably get away with a lower base, if you're just looking to, lean out and just look good for the beach, which is what it sounds like this person is. So you can maybe do 500 milligrams of testosterone a week, maybe do, 300-400 milligrams of Masteron a week, and maybe add in, 50 milligrams of Winstrol every other day, something like that. That would be a good cycle. Or you can do less. You can do 500 tests, and you can do, just some Masteron with it, and that would be enough, because you're not looking to, get on stage. It really depends on what your goals are. It looks like you're just looking to get lean. To me, the most important part of the lean part is the diet, the cardio, and the fat burners. Now, I would use some clenbuterol if I was you, because clenbuterol is the most potent fat burning agent on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. With that, as far as fat burning in terms of not killing you, DNP might be a little more potent, but we've talked about why you shouldn't use that, because you could die from that. I think that would be the way to go if I were you. Now, these two questions are from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. It's my app. You can download from the Android store or the iTunes store. It's $29 a month. You get me as a coach in your back pocket, basically. All my writings, all my videos organized in one place. All my protocols, drug off-season, pre-contest drug cycles for beginners, advanced. There's diets for men and women. My keto diet's on there. My rotation diets are on there. Carb cycling diets. It's a very great resource. There's a lot of workouts we put up on there. I do a Q&A video every single week exclusively for the app members. So that's an extra video, an extra Ask Dave you get every week on there. And I answer everyone's questions in an open forum on the app. So you see everyone's questions, everyone's answers. It's a great learning experience. And last month we had a stellar month. We had a lot of people sign up. So I want to absolutely thank all of you guys out there for, supporting the app, subscribing to it. I know you guys love it, and I appreciate you recommending it. It really inspires me to do more for the app and keep it going. So thank you.
Dave, before we go to the rest of our questions, our friend at Titan Medical Center, they have a sale on muscle building therapies. This 10% off until the end of the week. CJC 1295 with ipamorelin, Hercules Potion, IGF-1 LR3, Hexarelin, MK677, and tesamorelin. 10% off at Titan Medical Center. Yeah,
they have all the growth hormone releasing peptides. They have different ones, and you can ask them which ones they recommend. There's different combinations of them. The IGF-1 is real. That's what's a lot of people always ask me, hey, is that long R3 IGF-1 they sell on all these websites? The illegal ones. Are they good? I'm like, I don't know, but I can tell you one thing: the one on TitanMedicalCenter.com is real, because they compound it in the U.S. pharmacy here. And so, if you're looking for real IGF-1 long R3, they have it. And so, the best place to get it would be from a clinic like that, where it's coming from an approved U.S. created compounding pharmacy. If you start going online and playing guesswork, you don't know what you're getting. I had Bruce Neller on the TV show about 2 years ago, and we were talking about, he's an expert on China, and he said a lot of the peptides just coming out of China that people sell on their random websites, most of it's just GH, releasing agents, and it's the same thing, for everything. It's every peptide is the same, and you would never know because no one can test it. So it's very important that you get it from a good place. Our friends at Titan Medical Center are running a 10% sale this week on these modalities. Plus, if you mention Dave Palumbo, RxMuscle, you're going to get an additional discount. They're very good at recommending. They're very helpful. Tell them we sent you, and I think you'll be very satisfied.
Let's go to our questions from our YouTube community page, Instagram, and Facebook. All right, there was the question I was looking for, the one that you teased at the beginning of the episode. Where does the myth come from that EQ in particular, quote, turns the blood to cement? Does EQ even raise RBC and hematocrit more than any other androgen does?
All anabolic steroids, including testosterone, raise red blood cells. They all tell the bone marrow produce more red blood cells. That's why you could be on 100 milligrams of testosterone replacement dose per week, and you still have to go every couple of months and donate a pint of blood, because even the slightest, lowest amount of testosterone will do that. EQ, for some reason, has always had this reputation of thickening the blood, because they give it to the racehorses, and the racehorses need high red blood cells because it helps them run better oxygen carrying capacity. So it has this reputation for raising red blood cell count. But the truth of the matter is that all anabolic steroids, DECA does the same thing. Anadrol, believe it or not, a lot of people say, why would they create such a toxic drug, Anadrol? Because they created it for kids who were anemic, believe it or not, even though it sounds insane, right? Because it's got all those androgenic side effects. They didn't know how to stimulate, red blood cell production. They didn't have the synthetic hormone erythropoietin at the time. So they were using Anadrol to raise red blood cells. So it did it really quickly, and kids don't like shots. So they were doing it, they could pop the pills. And that's what it was created for, believe it or not, because all anabolic steroids do raise red blood cell count. And they all do it to pretty much the same extreme. So Anavar will do it as well. Winchell will do it. Everyone seems to respond a little differently to these different drugs. Some people, their red blood cells go through the roof. Other people, they don't. I think a lot of times also there's limiting factors. So when you have to produce more red blood cells, you need enough vitamin B12 present. You need enough iron present. So if you're a little deficient in those, you might not see your red blood cell count go up as high. Whereas people who take a lot of vitamins and who are fortifying with the right stuff, their red blood cell count goes high. Mine goes real high because I'm on V-mineralize, I'm on omega-lize, I'm on all these, replacement, I take extra vitamin C, which helps absorb iron. And so when you do all that, you're maximizing your ability to build red blood cells. Then I put that stimulus in there, just a little HRT. I take 80 milligrams a week, and I'm down to it. And I'm still, raising my red blood cell count. Every 2 months, I have to give a pint of blood to keep myself normal. So EQ doesn't do it any more than anything else. It's, for some reason, it's got this reputation, but it's really unwarranted.
Next question, again, this one from our YouTube community page. Again, we've been asking, or at least we've been posting, for Ask Dave on our YouTube community page a lot more frequently now, and we've gotten a great response. So thank you for participating in your contributions. Again, a lot of these are great questions that we're adding to the show. If I'm a poor converter of testosterone to dehydrotestosterone, what will be some of the safe compounds to use? And then I think he meant to say trend, but it's kind of autocorrected as trend. Be good in this situation.
I think he's asking if he's not really a poor converter. I think he means if he's a high converter of testosterone to DHT. I think that's what he's asking. I believe that's the question he's asking. Because if you're a bad converter, that would mean you don't convert a lot to DHT, so you don't have to worry about it. But I think he's worried about his DHT levels going too high. What I always recommend for people is you're not going to know what kind of a DHT converter you are until you get your DNA tested. I sell a product called DNA Power DNA testing on DavePalumbo.com. You can buy the kit. You swab your cheek, you send it in, and they'll send you the results. Plus, they set up an appointment with you with Carmen over there, and Carmen will go over your DNA test results with you. So, when I got my DNA tested and I found out I was a super, super, super high converter of testosterone DHT, I realized, man, I should have been taking a DHT blocker for my whole career. That's why I had acne, and that's probably why I got hair loss. I'm not saying it would have stopped everything, but it would have certainly alleviated some of the symptoms. Now, we have a product from Species Nutrition called STEROID that has a tremendously potent natural DHT blocker in there. It's in the saw palmetto extract that we use in Testalize. And I give it to girls, teenagers, boys, girls, to block. It helps their acne. People who are losing hair, it'll stop that. If you're very prone to hair growth on your face as a woman, it'll curtail that, because what it does is it blocks some of the conversion of testosterone into estrogen. And women have testosterone in their body too, and they convert it to, testosterone to DHT, excuse me. And women have it as well as men. And some women's testosterone are higher than other women's, and they convert highly to DHT. So if he's a bad converter, he might either, number one would be to get your DNA tested, find out how bad, or just go for blood work and see how high your DHT levels are. If they're super, super high, I would get on finasteride at 1 milligram to 2 milligrams per day. If you're not crazy high, but you're just a little high, I would try the Testalize product and take 3 pills twice a day of that. That's a more natural approach to it. Sometimes if you take the finasteride, it can lower your DHT too much, and then you lose your sex drive. And so you don't want that to happen. So managing DHT is really not about which drugs I should take. It's just, I always feel it's just managing the conversion of testosterone to DHT. And if you can do that, then you don't have to worry. You can take any drugs you want. Just like managing estrogen conversion. If your estrogen conversion from testosterone is very high, you take an aromatase inhibitor like Arimidex, Femara, Aromacin. And if you don't convert a lot, you don't take it, or you need less of it, because you don't want to lower your estrogen too much either, or you lose your sex drive and your ability to grow. So it's all about balancing. And that's what the Testalize product was designed. It was a testosterone optimizer, I call it. It's not a testosterone booster per se. It optimizes the levels. So if your testosterone is not converting to estrogen and it's not converting to DHT at high levels, then more stays as testosterone, and it gets higher, your levels. So you can raise testosterone by influencing what the other hormone production is doing in your body. And the only way to really know that is to go for blood work and check your estradiol levels, check your DHT levels. If one of those is super high, because it's usually not both, then you address it. If they're both high, you address both of them. If neither is high, you don't do anything. And that's the best way to go. But the only way to know would be to go for blood work.
This question starts, and I mean, again, debatable now, considering today's era. You could very well say that we're entering into another golden era of bodybuilding. He starts the question by saying everyone agrees that 90s era was king. But if we put that aside, do you think that is the case because they may have stayed off growth till later in their careers because it wasn't as much available or readily available, and benefited from muscle maturity before adding the mass?
Yeah, I mean, guys, I think the guys in the 90s were using GH. They weren't using as much because it was very expensive and it wasn't as readily available. So, guys would use 2 to 4 IUs the most. If you used 4 IUs, you had a lot of money. Most people, didn't do that. But I think the pros, once they started earning money by winning prize money, they started using about 4 IUs a day. I don't know anyone that was using more than that in the 90s. Maybe toward the end, and guys were starting to get it a little cheaper and they were starting to bump it up a little bit. But by and far, anyone who used GH in the 90s was using like 2 to 4 IUs a day. And they were getting very good results out of it. But in the 90s, one of the things that people really, really emphasized was training, because you had Mike Mentzer, Dorian Yates, really, really pushing the whole training, high intensity, less volume, super heavy weights, maximum contraction. I call the 90s the training era. Like, that's really where I learned how to train myself. And there was a huge emphasis on that. And there was a lot of free weight movements. There weren't as many machines as there are today. So hammer strength just came out and guys were really getting into that. But there was a lot, if you look at the old training stuff in Flex magazine, you would see Flex Wheeler, Chris Cormier, Rico McClinton doing, incline barbell bench presses, and dumbbell presses and dumbbell flies. You weren't watching them on a machine doing that. Now, if you go on Instagram, everyone's on a machine, right, doing something. So I think the free weight movements that were being emphasized, and we're really building a better base. If you look at the massive guys today, like Nick Walker, this is a guy who didn't build his physique on machines. He built it on free weights. And we've seen all those videos of him in the early part of his career doing that. So you have to understand that the training there was a big emphasis on that. And I think that's why we saw better developed physiques. Nowadays, the guys are bigger today. There's no doubt about it. I mean, to say that the guys were bigger in the 90s is not true. The guys are bigger today, and they might be better, but I think that there was a lot of just amazing genetic gifts or genetically gifted guys in the 90s. I mean, from Paul Dillette to Vince Taylor, Flex Wheeler. I mean, these guys had the most Chris Cormier, you got to throw in there, Sean Ray. These guys had really, really gifted, structures, and you can't create that. We have now, I think, at the top level of the sport, some of the best that we've seen since the 90s. I really do. I think we're really coming into a new age of bodybuilding where we're seeing a lot better guys. And I think guys at the top are realizing that they have to really push it in the gym now. It's about training. I think it's finally they're waking up to the fact that they really have to focus on the training a lot. And we're seeing that a lot more now. I noticed that in the last 2 or 3 years, guys really focused on training. I remember I'm watching videos from Derek, out in his Tampa over there training with Matt Grego. And, we've seen Nick Walker, obviously the crazy workouts he does. And I think that people are getting the message. It's about training. The drugs are the same. The drugs will be around forever. Steroids have not changed for 50 years. Yes, we've added GH, we've added some peptides, but the bottom line is the reason why guys are, growing is because we know more about diet. The nutritional supplements are better, and training. The training will be the key. Once people realize that training is the most important thing you're going to do, and making sure that you're lifting heavy weights and doing full range of motion, together with the drugs and the nutrition, we're going to see guys that are going to surpass the 90s, I promise you, in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, sticking on the theme of training, this next question is about Mike Mentzer. Ricky says he's been on a binge of Mike Mentzer videos. As a natural lifter, his philosophy on muscle growth and the process is very eye-opening. Your take on high intensity. Also, did you know Mike? Any stories or takes on Mike Mentzer?
I've told the Mike Mentzer my one encounter in person with Mike Mentzer when I told you it was 319 pounds posing in the parking lot of Gold's Venice, and Mike got out of his old Volare and station wagon there, and he walked past me, and then he did a double take and came back, and he started circling me and saying, "Holy shit, this guy's a freak! He's a freak! You're a freak!" I said, "Mike," I'll take that as a very, very high compliment coming from you. He's like, "I got to go train someone," and he took off. So that was my one encounter with Mike Mentzer. But Mentzer was interesting because he was very, very philosophical about training. The problem is a lot of times when you get guys that get too into their head about doing something, he reduced bodybuilding too simplistically down to basically one, right? He went from lower volume, builds better muscle because you can do higher intensity. And then he said, well, you know what? Maybe we don't need to do 6 sets. Maybe we can do 1 set and accomplish the same thing. And I think that's where he lost me. So I would read all his articles in all the magazines, and I would, follow his protocols. And then I lowered my volume, and I got very good results. The last set is the most important set, the heaviest set. That's where you're growing from. And then he said, you know what? You don't need to do more than 2 exercises, 1 set for each exercise. So 2 sets you're basically doing per body part. I couldn't wrap my hands around that. It wasn't enough. I don't care how much intensity you generate on those 2 sets. It's just not enough. Maybe if you're at Dorian Yates level already of development, you're just maintaining. I don't think you're going to make improvements. I think he reduced it too much because he got too into his head. Like, I can make this even more simplistic, even more simplistic, even more simplistic. And he went too much to the extreme. But the whole concept of taking that 80s, early 90s mentality of high volume, we were in the gym for 3 hours. I mean, Arnold used to train for 5 hours. And saying that's overtraining. You're not allowing your body a chance to recover. You need to take days off during the week. Once I incorporated those tenets of his training philosophy, my whole body changed. And I realized, holy shit, you do need to take days off. You can't treat bodybuilding like a long distance runner who never takes days off and he runs every day. And you have to maximize what you're doing in the gym. You can't just be there. I would be trained with my friend Frank. We would do like a whole chest workout, which would be 20 sets. And then he would run around and do extra set on top of that. And I would feel like, well, I'm missing something. I better go do it with him. And all we were doing is just overtraining. And I was realizing I wasn't getting any bigger at all. I looked exactly. As a matter of fact, I might have been getting smaller. So I cut the volume back after reading Mentzer. And I said, you know what, Frank, if you want to go finish and do more, that's good. My 10 sets or 12 sets we just did, I'm fine. And I would leave the gym, and you know what? My body changed dramatically. So Mentzer was huge in really popularizing lower volume, higher intensity, but I think he went too far with it.
Question about electrolytes. Your thoughts on managing electrolytes. How does one assess the proper amounts and what exactly to take?
Yeah. Well, the easiest thing would be to take in an electrolyte drink. I eat an enormous amount of salt in my diet, which is really, most people are sodium deficient. They're really not potassium deficient. It's the sodium deficiency. And a lot of bodybuilders don't like salt. They restrict it because they think they're going to lose weight faster, which is the absolute wrong thing to do. You want to eat as much salt as you can, because what that does is it makes you less sodium sensitive. The more sodium you take in, the lower your aldosterone levels go. And aldosterone is a hormone released from the adrenal glands that is responsible for sodium reabsorption. So if you don't eat sodium all the time, your aldosterone levels go really high in your body. And then every time you do eat something with salt, you retain the salt in the water, which is not good. If you eat a lot of salt all the time, aldosterone levels go super low, and your body just keeps what it needs and it gets rid of the extra. So, I mean, that's the way to do it. Now, if you want to take in a little bit of extra electrolytes, what I did was, when we created Amino Evolved, which is our fermented amino acid product, we don't use hair like most amino acid products. To get the amino acids, they use human hair from the Chinese barbershops. We use fermented amino acids in Amino Evolved, and we have a tremendous flavoring system. It tastes absolutely delicious. We have the mango flavor. We have the strawberry watermelon. We have blue raspberry, and we have the iced tea, which is, if you like iced tea, it's better than country time iced tea. You'd think there's sugar in there. And we put sodium and some fat. We put an electrolyte balance in there, just so that because a lot of people sip it while they're working out, and if you do that, at least you're replacing electrolytes as you're sweating, which is a good idea. That's why we put it in there. There's no carbs in there, but you're getting your essential aminos, branched chain aminos, and electrolytes. And that's why I put it in there. I think it's a smart thing to do, especially if you're not eating enough sodium in your diet. A lot of people, like I said, I have friends that just don't like the taste of salt. Now, it's interesting. I talked about the DNA panel I ran on myself, that we sell from DNA Power. And one of the things I learned about myself is that I don't taste salt like other people do. So in other words, what tastes salty to another person might taste a little bland to me. So I tend to oversalt my food, probably because I don't taste salt as I guess as sensitively as maybe you might. So, which is good for bodybuilding, right? Because I make sure I get enough sodium in my diet, because I can never salt my food enough. Whereas other people are very salt sensitive. They taste salt very well. So for them, they don't want to put salt in their food because it might taste too salty to them. So a lot of times those bodybuilders have hydration issues, and they can't get pumped in the gym, and they feel dehydrated a lot because they're not taking enough salt. In a situation like that, you want to take an electrolyte drink like the Amino Evolved, because that's the only way you're going to get enough sodium in your diet. I can't hear you, Sid. Still can't hear it. He's got himself on mute.
I did it again with the mute button.
You're good.
Question about hair loss on TRT and finasteride dosing. Do you feel 1 mg every other day is generally enough to stop DHT while on TRT? How much of a potential negative impact on hypertrophy would take place if you increase finasteride in conjunction with an increase in testosterone administration for times when you're quote unquote blasting?
Yeah. When you start finasteride, if you're going to start finasteride, which is a DHT blocking agent, we talked about it earlier, for hair loss, you have to stay on it. If you go off it, all the hair that you've recouped from from blocking the DHT production in your body, you could potentially lose again. So you got to stay on it. So the minimum dosage is 1 milligram per day. I started in 2000 when I first got my first hair grafts back then, and the guy, he told me you got to stay on it. And so the 1 milligram wasn't really being effective for me, and probably 1 milligram for an average person who doesn't take steroids would work. But I was taking, I was on steroid cycles. I was competing back then. So I decided, because after discussing it with someone else who also was going through the same thing, that 2.5 milligrams would be ideal. Now, the advantage of that is you can get a prescription that your insurance company will cover for ProScar. ProScar is like for prostate enlargement. So if the doctor writes you a 5 milligram ProScar prescription and you crack them in half and you take 2.5 milligrams every day, you're going to get good protection, and your insurance will pay for it. If you do the Propecia, which is the 1 milligram dosage, that's considered cosmetic, and insurance won't cover that. So you're better off getting the 5 milligram pills and just cracking them in half every day because it'll be a lot cheaper. And I found that, once again, the 2.5 milligram dosage is really what I need. I take 2.5 milligrams even when I'm not on anything. Like when I was trying to do my baby making protocol and have my 3 kids, I still stayed on the 2.5 milligrams because I'm a very high DHT converter. And so when I would go for blood work and I would test my DHT levels and I was on no steroids and no HRT, I still was just in the normal range with 2.5 milligrams of finasteride. So once again, it depends on how much you convert. But I would, if you're going to do it for hair loss, I would try 2.5 milligrams, especially if you're going to be on a cycle.
I'll take one more question. This one is about best movements for lower abs. We have gotten this fairly often, but again, new audiences. So I guess people want to know your best exercise to target the lower abs.
I used to do leg lifts. So I would lay on the floor. I don't believe in using weights for abs. I always do body weight. But then again, my body weight was always heavy. So maybe it was like using weights. I don't know. So I would always lay on the floor and put my legs up on my couch, and I would do crunches where I would just basically lift my shoulder blades off the ground. And then for the upper portion of my abs. And then I would do leg lifts. So I'd be on the floor and I'd lift my legs 6 inches off the floor, and I would come down. I wouldn't touch the floor, obviously. And I would just do sets of 100 of those, maybe 2 sets of those. So I would do 2 sets of 100 of the leg lifts, and then and you got to build up to that. You're not going to be able to do it all. You might be able to do 10 reps when you first start. And once again, you're not lifting your legs all the way up. You're only lifting them 6 inches off the floor. And that kind of, targets those lower abs. And then the crunches, are going to target the upper abs. Now, once I stopped competing, I started just doing the ones on the floor for my crunches, and I noticed my lower abs look great. So I don't know. I don't know if you even need the lower ab, the leg lift exercises, but I do know you need to train your abs. I train my abs every day, usually 6 days a week at least. And I don't do a lot of sets, but once you get good at doing them, you can work up to doing one. I do one set of 200 reps, and I'm doing it while I'm watching TV. I stretch first and then I do abs. So that's what I recommend. I always did that during my entire career. You do work your abs indirectly when you're doing all kinds of squatting movements and deadlifts and bent over rows because you're stabilizing with your core and everything like that. But you should do direct ab work too. And then I always do those. If you ever seen our video, my intestinal breathing exercise video where I work the transverse abdominis, it's kind of like doing vacuums, but it's a little different. And that video has a lot of hits on if you just put intestinal breathing exercises, RxMuscle, it'll come up and you'll see my suggestions on that. But yeah, that's enough. I wouldn't be doing weight. I know Milos likes to do rope crunches and stuff like that. I'm not really into that, to be honest with you.
I had to squeeze this one in only because somebody asked it, and I remember it brings me back to 8th grade health class where our teacher told us that if you start lifting at an early age, that it was going to stunt your growth. I don't know if there's any truth behind that, but again, the question here is the best age to get children into weight training. What would you do with your own kids? And is there any truth to that if you lift at an early age before you're fully developed, that it would stunt your growth?
Possibly if you're lifting super, super heavy weights. This study about really comes from gymnastics, because in gymnastics, these kids are flipping around and they're landing and they're smashing, their bone plates together. And I think sometimes you can damage the bone plates and it could stunt these kids' growth. The excessive, and don't forget, these gymnasts will train 8 hours a day. It's crazy how many hours these kids will train. And they find that those kids sometimes have stunted growth from that. But weight training is not going to do that. And most kids are not lifting super heavy weights anyway. A boy doesn't hit puberty till he's 12, maybe. So, any lifting before that should be more body weight stuff, pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, maybe some light, arm curls. But once you hit 12 and the boy starts releasing testosterone, then you can the weight training actually makes sense. Same thing with a girl. I would be doing more body weight stuff until they hit, kind of like that 10 years old, 11 years old, when they hit puberty and they can start, releasing some hormones that actually can help build some muscle. It's always good to start kids, early with sports and exercises and stuff like that. Most kids are not disciplined like they're going to do it, but then there are some those one kids that just get completely consumed with it and they love it. And so I don't think there's an age that's too young to lift weights. I just think how much weight you're lifting is the key. Once again, because you're not going to build massive amounts of muscle at a very young age because the hormone levels of the kids are not there. You're better off, if they like to train with weights, just have them do light weights and just reps and stuff like that, just so they build those mind-muscle connections with, how to feel the biceps, how to feel the back muscle, how to feel the chest. Doesn't matter how much they're lifting, but they're learning the routine so that when they do get, a little bigger, and they do start producing hormones and they have the ability to build muscle. Now they've already learned the motions and they can go through it and do that. If my kids want to lift weights, I'll show them how. I'd rather teach them the right way to do it than have them learn the wrong way to do it. That's for sure. And if they don't want to do it, then they won't do it. So I don't push it on them, because as soon as you push something on your kids, they'll push back against you most of the time.
And that's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. If you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. We have all new episodes of the After Hours podcast, of course, Heavy Muscle Radio. We have an interview with Sergio Oliva Jr. from this last week's Arnold Classic Expo. And then, of course, all of our content recapping the 2025 Arnold Classic. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below. And as always, we appreciate all of your support. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.